Welcome to the pre-application information session for the fiscal year 2020 Grants to Engage Men and Boys as Allies in the Prevention of Violence Against Women and Girls program, otherwise referred to as the Engaging Men program. The Office on Violence Against Women, also referred to as OVW, is hosting this webinar to go over the FY20 solicitation for the EM program, the Engaging Men program. My name is Kelly Green, and I am the program specialist assigned to the Engaging Men program. The purpose of the pre-application information session is to highlight a few key points in the solicitation. However, it is not the intent, nor is there sufficient time to go over every aspect of the solicitation. All applicants are responsible for reading the FY20 Engaging Men solicitation and the OVW solicitation companion guide, and ensuring all applicants are responsible for reading the FY20 Engaging Men solicitation and the OVW solicitation companion guide and ensuring that a complete application is submitted. OVW staff cannot comment on the quality of an applicant's proposed project or provide any information outside of what is included in the solicitation. However, Engaging Men program staff will be available to respond to questions about the application requirements throughout the period that the solicitation is open. Please feel free to send questions to ovw.consulyouth@usdoj.gov or call the Engaging Men point of contact at 202-514-0390. Before we get started, you may find it helpful to have the Engaging Men solicitation in front of you for a point of reference during this information session. Please note that this year, OVW has released two separate solicitations for what used to be called the Consolidated Youth and Engaging Men Grant Program. There is one solicitation specifically for children and youth, and there is one application specifically for engaging men and boys. This information session that you are listening to today is focused solely on the Engaging Men solicitation. If you are interested in submitting an application for the Children and Youth program, please watch the information session specifically for that grant program. The Engaging Men program supports projects that create educational programming and community organizing to encourage men and boys to work as allies with women and girls to prevent domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and/or stalking. Within the program are three distinct purpose areas, which I will discuss in more detail in a few moments. Applications are due by 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time on Monday, March 30th, 2020. OVW will not accept late submissions except under limited circumstances as described on pages 19 to 21 of the solicitation. In addition to the application due date, there are other important deadlines that affect your ability to submit an application. The cover of the solicitation provides information on registering. Registration includes three steps. First, obtaining a Data Universal Number System number, otherwise known as a DUNS number. Second, registering with the System for Award Management System, otherwise known as SAM. And third, registering with grants.gov. Every applicant must obtain a DUNS number and register online with SAM and grants.gov. The registration process can take several days and must be completed before applicants may submit an application. OVW strongly encourages applicants to start this process no later than March 11th, 2020. Every year, applications are rejected during the submission process because the applicant's DUNS number and/or registration with SAM have expired, or the applicant did not begin the registration process early enough. At the conclusion of this webinar, it is highly recommended that you start this process if you have not already done so of the solicitation. All applications for the Engaging Men program must be submitted through grants.gov. If you have questions specific to the registration or submission process through grants.gov, please contact their applicant support at 1-800-518-4726. Additional information related to the submission process can be found on page 23 of the solicitation. OVW anticipates notifying all applicants of funding decisions by October 1st, 2020. The grant award period is for 36 months, tentatively beginning on October 1st, 2020, and ending on September 30th, 2023. Applicants should submit applications with project activities and budgets that reflect this period. Applicants may request up to $350,000. See page 4 for more information on the award period and the amount of the award. Both new and continue applications are being accepted. New applications are those that have never received funding under the previous Consolidated Grant Program to address children and youth experiencing domestic and sexual assault and engage men and boys as allies, otherwise known as the CYEM program, or whose funding under the CYEM program expired more than 12 months ago. Continuation applications are those that have an existing CYEM grant or whose CYEM grant closed within the last 12 months. Grantees that were not awarded a Consolidated Youth and Grantees that were awarded a Consolidated Youth and Engaging Men grant in FY2018 or FY2019 are not eligible to apply for funding in FY2020. Both the CY and Engaging Men programs are highly competitive. Being funded for one does not guarantee you will be funded for the other. Applicants applying to both the CY and Engaging Men programs should consider including Engaging Men activities in the prevention strategies for the CY program in case they are not funded under the Engaging Men program. This is true, too, for current CYEM grantees with EM projects that are applying for CY funding. I want to touch on no-cost extensions for current grantees that are considering submitting a continuation application. No-cost extensions and receiving continuation funding are not guaranteed. No-cost extensions are approved for extenuating circumstances that have prevented grantees from meeting the project goals and objectives. They are not for spending down unspent funds. In the last funding cycle, a few CYEM grantees wanted a no-cost extension but did not submit a no-cost extension because they were counting on receiving continuation funding but did not receive an award. Because of this, they were scrambling the last 30 days of their current award to meet the goals and objectives and or request a no-cost extension. Simply put, it caused a lot of unnecessary stress for everyone. Therefore, current grantees are encouraged to submit both a continuation application and a no-cost extension if applicable. See page 4 for more information. Eligibility is mentioned on the cover of the solicitation as well as on pages 5 to 7. Foreign entities and programs are not eligible for funding under the Engaging Men program. Applications that are submitted by ineligible entities or that do not meet the program requirements may not be considered for funding. There are 6 types of entities that may submit an application for the Engaging Men program. The first 3 are nonprofits, non-governmental entities, and tribal organizations. These entities must meet one of the 3 listed requirements on page 6 in order to be eligible as the lead applicant. They must be able to demonstrate a history of developing or providing mentorship programs to train men and boys as leaders and role models for youth and or other men. They must be able to demonstrate a history of creating public education or awareness programs, or they must be able to demonstrate that the organization or program's primary purpose is to provide support and or enrichment programming for men or boys. Some examples of entities that meet the above-mentioned requirements are Big Brothers Big Sisters, fatherhood programs, local chapters of 100 Black Men of America or similar organizations, the YMCA or YWCA, workforce programs, and faith-based organizations or programs. The last three types of entities that may submit an application are Indian tribes, a unit of local government, or an agency of a unit of local government. Some examples of this type of entity are a city or county health department, the Department of Children and Families within the city or county government, or the Department of Parks and Recreation. Next, I'm going to discuss the required partnerships. Applicants and partners are limited to meeting or fulfilling only one partnership category or role. Let me repeat this because it's important. Applicants and partners are limited to serving as the agency or organization to meet a specific partnership requirement in only one category or role. This means that every applicant must have at least one partner as outlined in the solicitation. Applications that fail to include the required partnerships will be removed from the review process. Two examples of what the required partnerships may look like are, first, a victim service provider is submitting an application to develop a program for men in the community to become leaders in their neighborhoods by teaching young boys bystander intervention skills. The required partners for the project will be a community-based organization that provides support, enrichment, or leadership development programming for men or boys. The community-based organization is not a victim service provider, but they possess the expertise and access necessary for the victim service provider to engage with the men and boys that will be participating in the project. The second example is a community-based organization that provides a fatherhood program for the local men. The proposed project will integrate training and education on domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking into the existing program to empower men to be allies in preventing violence against women. Because the community-based organization does not have the same expertise that a victim service provider would have related to the VAWA crimes, they must partner with a victim service provider. Refer to page 6 for the full definition of a victim service provider. To qualify as a victim service provider, the victim service provider must provide direct victim services to victims of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and/or stalking. These services must be one of the primary purposes for which the organization exists. Examples of direct victim services include victim advocacy, medical and court accompaniment, short and long-term counseling specifically focused on the VAWA crimes, or maintaining a hotline for one of the VAWA crimes. Examples of victim service providers are domestic violence shelters, rape crisis centers, and child advocacy centers. Before moving on to the next section, I want to discuss the importance of partnerships. One of the requirements of the Engaging Men program is the development of a multidisciplinary team. Because of this, applicants are encouraged to have more than the required partnerships. Second, other than the victim service provider, it is not a requirement of this program that the applicant or the partners have experience or expertise in working with domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, or stalking. This is why a victim service provider is a required partner if they are not the applicant. Each of the partners should bring the specific skills and knowledge necessary to support the overall successful development and implementation of the proposed project. When determining whom to partner with, you should take into consideration any specific populations you will be working with, gaining access to men and boys, establishing credible messengers for the programming, and any other specific skills or resources that may be required. You want to establish a strong multidisciplinary team to successfully implement and support the overall success of the proposed project. And this slide shows you some examples of what some of these additional partnerships may look like. Again, think outside of the box and think about who you're going to be serving and who needs to be at the table with you in order to reach all of the people within your project. Before we get into the mandatory program requirements and each part of the application, I want to go over a few items that will help you when developing your proposed project. OVW does not fund activities that jeopardize victim safety, deter or prevent physical or emotional healing for victims, or allow offenders to escape responsibility for their actions. The Solicitation Companion Guide contains a list of these activities. You can find the Solicitation Companion Guide on the OVW website under Resources for Applicants. OVW and the Engaging Men program have specific out-of-scope activities that cannot be supported with grant funds. To assist with submitting a strong application, I'm going to go over some of the ones that have caused past applicants to receive point deductions during the peer review process. Please review the full list of out-of-scope activities on page 3 of the solicitation prior to writing your application to ensure you do not include any of the listed activities in your project. The first is number 2, direct victim services. This specific grant program is a prevention-based program. It does not allow for the delivery of victim services. If you are interested in providing direct victim services, you should consider applying for the Children and Youth program instead. Next is number 5, sexual harassment, bullying, and gender norms. Grant funds may not be used to develop and/or provide training, products, or policies that focus primarily on sexual harassment, bullying, or gender norms. OVW recognizes that these issues are serious and can be traumatic experiences for children and youth or cause discomfort. OVW also understands the intersection of the VAWA crimes and sexual harassment, bullying, and gender norms. However, OVW grant funds must be used to primarily address the crimes listed in the Violence Against Women Act, which are domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking. To avoid possible point deduction, applicants should refrain from including activities and/or strategies that address sexual harassment, bullying, and gender norms without a clear linkage to the VAWA crimes in your project narrative. Next is number 7, ceremonies, celebrations, and entertainment. Grant funds may not be used to support award ceremonies or other celebratory events, or the purchase of tickets for entertainment activities such as sporting events, movies, concerts, or museums. For example, grant funds may not be used to fund a graduation celebration for the participants of an 8-week mentoring program. Another example is grant funds may not be used to pay for the transportation and lunches for a group of boys to visit a local art center. Number 8 is athletics. Grant funds may not be used to pay the salaries for coaches. Grant funds may be used to support a portion of a coach's salary specific to the time spent on project activities. For example, coaches may receive training to prevent sexual assault or dating violence on the team or by team members. This could be supported with grant funds. Another example is a coach may provide prevention education to the team members, and the time spent delivering this education to the team members could be supported with grant funds. Grant funds may not be used to support an individual's participation on an athletic team or event. Grant funds may not be used to buy uniforms or pay for transportation to and from games. Grant funds may be used to transport a team to a prevention education training, though. Number 11, the service area. Grant funds may not be used to conduct or support regional or statewide activities. All applicants must ensure that proposed projects support community-specific activities and strategies only. In the past, there have been applications removed for further review because the proposed project was a statewide initiative. To avoid having this happen to your application, be sure your project is focused to a specific community. Some examples of activities that are not community-based and could result in point deductions include national or statewide podcasts, organizing or presenting at regional, statewide, or national conferences, and educational or awareness campaigns that have been developed for regional or statewide distribution. Each year, OVW identifies specific topics or issues related to domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking that we refer to as priority areas. Applications proposing projects to address one or more of the priority areas are given special consideration during the recommendation process. However, please note that applicants are not required to address a priority area. It is completely optional. If you do choose to include one or more of the priority areas in your proposed project, be certain you have reviewed the requirements for each and that your project narrative and budget include activities and strategies to address the specific priority area. This year, the OVW priority areas for the Engaging Men program are to increase efforts to combat stalking. Applicants proposing to address this priority area must propose projects where at least 50% of the activities address stalking and or cyber stalking, including the intersection of these crimes with dating violence. The second priority area is to address the specific challenges that rural communities face in responding to domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking. To qualify for this priority area, applicants must describe what makes the service area rural and how they will address specific challenges in the rural community. The purpose area for the Engaging Men program can be found on page 2 of the solicitation. Applicants may select one or more of the purpose areas to address in the proposed project. The activities described in the project narrative and the budget should be reflective of the selected purpose area or areas. Funds under this program may be used to address one or more of the purpose areas. Purpose Area 1, develop and or implement programming to recruit and train men and boys to serve as role models, positive influencers, change agents, and or mentors to address and prevent domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and or stalking. Purpose Area 2, integrate education on domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and or stalking into established support and or enrichment programs to assist men and or boys in developing healthy relationships, challenging social norms that support violence against women and girls, becoming active bystanders, and understanding the intersection of the 4 VAWA crimes with other types of violence, such as gang violence or gun violence. Purpose Area 3, develop and implement a Train the Trainer program for community organizations or programs and or governmental agencies or programs to incorporate education and or training into their existing work with male clients to prevent violence against women and girls. Applicants that receive funding under the Engaging Men program are required to engage in and provide certain activities throughout the award period. I'm going to highlight just a few. The full list of mandatory program requirements is on pages 4 to 5 of the solicitation. Please read these carefully and make sure your proposed project includes each of the mandatory requirements. Failure to address each of the mandatory requirements in the project narrative may result in a deduction of points during the peer review and or programmatic review process. Grantees are required to participate in OVW-sponsored training and technical assistance, including new grantee orientation. All grantees must participate in the technical assistance events and activities that are organized and supported by the Engaging Men program designated technical assistance providers. This includes, but is not limited to, monthly and or quarterly conference or telephone calls, site visits, in-person training institutes, peer-to-peer learning opportunities, and web-based trainings. Applicants are required to set aside $40,000 to $45,000 of their total budgets for this requirement. I will go over this in more detail in the budget section. Next, create or expand a multidisciplinary team, otherwise known as an MDT, to develop and guide the proposed project. The MDT must meet regularly and be representative of the community to be served through the project. Additionally, all projects must provide crisis intervention for participants at all educational, outreach, and training events. The person that provides the crisis intervention must not be the facilitator of the event. This person must be available to participants if they are triggered or wish to speak with someone during the event, not just after the event. The person providing the service must be trained in crisis intervention per the organization or state licensing or training requirements. All projects must cross-train project staff, project partners, and MDT members. This means that victim service providers will be providing training and education on the VAWA crimes and the impact on survivors to other members of the project and vice versa. Community organizations and other programs will be providing training and education to the victim service providers on working with and engaging with men and boys. All grants have an initial planning phase prior to implementing the full scope of the proposed project. The planning phase is approximately 6 months for new grantees and 3 months for continuation grantees. During the planning phase, grantees will be conducting a community needs and strengths assessment specific to the proposed project and design a strategic plan for implementation of the project. Before moving to the next section, it is important to note that all of the activities listed on pages 4 to 5 are required. However, applicants may and are strongly encouraged to add additional activities beyond what is required. Please refer to the solicitation beginning on page 7 for specific information related to the content and format of the application and submission process. All applications must include the following 3 components: a project narrative, a budget and budget narrative, and a memorandum of understanding. Applications that do not include these 3 components will be considered substantially incomplete and will not be considered for funding. In addition, the Engaging program is a very competitive program, often coming down to a fraction of a point between being funded and not being funded. Points may be deducted during the peer review process or the programmatic review process for applications that do not adhere to the formatting requirements. For example, I've seen applications lose 1 point for not including the headings and subheadings for the corresponding sections, which resulted in that application falling below the cutoff score, ultimately eliminating that application from consideration for funding. The first section is the summary data sheet, and it is worth 5 points. This document is scored during the review. This document is scored during the review process and should be no more than 4 pages. The best way to avoid having points deducted is to answer each of the 16 questions in the order they are listed in the solicitation. Some applicants find it helpful to cut and paste the questions into a new document and provide a response below each question. This also makes it easy for the reviewers to see if all of the information requested in the section has been addressed. Question number 5 is specifically asking for current or pending OVW grants and/or cooperative agreements, including those that have ended within the last 12 months from March 30th, 2020, whether you are the lead grantee or a sub-grantee, otherwise known as a project partner. Question number 6 is asking for other federal grants from which the applicant or a project partner is currently receiving funding and has applied for funding in FY20 to do work similar to this program. Please do not list every federal grant you currently have or have applied to unless it is similar to the work you will be doing under this specific solicitation. Question number 9 is asking you to identify the percentage of activities that you will focus on the specific crimes listed. Applicants do not receive special consideration or extra points for addressing every crime listed, so applicants should not feel obligated to address each one. Applicants should mark only those crimes that the project will address. For example, If you submit an application under Purpose Area 3, your breakdown may be 80% dating violence, 10% sexual assault, and 10% stalking. On the other hand, if you're submitting an application under Purpose Area 1, your breakdown may be 100% domestic violence. And alternatively, if you are submitting an application under Purpose Area 2, your breakdown may be 60% sexual assault, 20% dating violence, or 20% sex trafficking. Remember, the project narrative must clearly demonstrate that you are addressing the crimes you have identified on the summary data sheet. If it does not, the application may lose points in the project narrative section. Before moving on, I want to talk just a bit about the sex trafficking. Engaging men funds may be used to address sex trafficking, but only in the context of sexual assault. Question number 10 is asking if you are a current grantee or a project partner for a CYEM grant. And question number 11 is asking whether any of the proposed partners for this proposed project are current grantees or sub-grantees for a CYEM grant. Questions 10 and 11 are similar to question 5. However, 10 and 11 are specific to the CYEM program. So please be sure to answer these questions as 10 and 11 and not assume that providing a response to question 5 also answers 10 and 11. Peer reviewers will deduct points if you do not answer questions 10 and 11. The next section is the proposal abstract. The proposal abstract is not scored, but it is used throughout the review process, so it is important to include a well-written abstract. See page 9 of the solicitation for the information that should be included in this section. The next section is the project narrative, and it consists of 3 sections: the purpose of application, what will be done, and who will implement. All combined, the project narrative is worth a total of 60 points and is the bulk of the application. This is where applicants provide detailed information related to the proposed project. Before I get into each section of the project narrative, it is important to discuss the page limit. It is imperative that you are mindful of the formatting and the number of allowable pages. See page 7 for specifics. Peer reviewers are instructed to stop reading and scoring this section at the page number cutoff. You do not want to lose valuable points due to going over the page limit. With that said, the project narrative should be no more than 15 pages, double-spaced, 12-point font. The purpose of the application is worth 15 points, and this section describes the need for the project and helps reviewers understand your specific community needs. Common mistakes include providing too much information that is not relevant to the proposed project, or not enough information to be responsive to what is being asked. Follow the guidance on page 10 of the solicitation to ensure you are providing the required information. Also keep in mind that this section counts towards the page limit. You want to be sure that you are being responsive to the questions in this section, while at the same time ensuring you have enough pages remaining to provide detailed information on the proposed project. I have seen applications where the applicant used more pages to describe the need for the project than the number of pages to describe the project activities to address the problem. Strong applications and applications that score high are able to find the balance between justifying the need and providing detailed information on how the need will be addressed. The next section is the what will be done section, and it is worth 30 points. This is the section where you will describe what you are going to do with the grant funds. You should provide detailed information that clearly describes the activities and strategies to support your proposed project. The goals and objectives should be clear and detailed to reviewers. Stop. The goals and objectives should be clear and detailed so reviewers understand how the proposed activities meet the needs identified in the program requirements. For example, there is a difference between stating, "We will train men," and "We will train 15 men to serve as trainers in bystander intervention for the boys at the local community youth center." In addition to the 11 items that must be addressed in this section, each purpose area also has specific criteria that also needs to be addressed. Be certain to include the information requested for the specific purpose area or areas that you stated on the data summary sheet that your application will be addressing in the proposed project. Some common mistakes to avoid in this section are not providing a description of products to be developed or purchased with grant funds. If products such as brochures, videos, billboards, or curriculums are mentioned in this section, there should be a line item for them included in the budget and vice versa. Another common mistake is not describing how products and/or services will be tailored to meet the needs of a specific population to be served, such as age groups, different types of audiences that you will be reaching out to for training and education. Another common mistake is not including activities and strategies that will be developed and implemented to meet the OVW priority areas that the applicant has identified on the summary data sheet. Remember, the priority areas are optional and no points are deducted for not addressing a priority area. However, points are deducted if a priority area is identified and there is no supporting activities provided in the What Will Be Done section. For continuation applications, not providing details on how the newly proposed project expands or enhances the current or last project is a common mistake. The next section, Who Will Implement the Project, is worth 15 points. In this section, the applicant should identify whom the key individuals and organizations will be that are involved in the proposed project. This section must demonstrate that the individuals and organizations identified have the capacity to address the stated needs and can successfully implement the proposed project activities. As a friendly reminder, this section is also part of the page limit. You will want to keep this section focused on who is involved in the major project activities and who is most responsible for ensuring the goals and objectives of the project are met. Please refer to pages 11 and 12 to ensure you include all of the required information for this section. The next section, Budget Detail, Worksheet, and Narrative, are worth 15 points. During the peer review process, the peer reviewers will be reviewing and scoring the budgets to ensure they meet the program requirements and do not include any unallowable activities and/or expenses. It is the applicant's responsibility to read this section thoroughly in order to submit a proper budget. Pages 12 and 13 provide detailed information on how to develop and submit your budget for your proposed project. There is also a link to a sample budget in the solicitation. I encourage you to use the format in the sample budget when creating and submitting your budget for this program. All applicants must include funds specifically for OVW mandated technical assistance and travel costs. The Engaging Men program has a dedicated team of technical assistance providers specifically for providing comprehensive technical assistance programming to Engaging Men grantees. All Engaging Men grantees are required to attend and participate in the technical assistance events. Projects located in the contiguous U.S. must allocate $40,000, and projects located in the U.S. territories, Hawaii, or Alaska must allocate $45,000. Applicants should plan to send at least 4 individuals involved in their project to 3 OVW mandated technical assistance training events each year of the award for a total of 9 training events. In addition to the training events, grantees are required to send a minimum of 3 individuals to the new grantee orientation. This funding may not be used for any other travel and/or training, and any remaining funds in this section will be returned to OVW at the end of the award period. If applicants are interested in attending conferences or other trainings to increase their team's skill and knowledge, additional funding outside of the $40,000 to $45,000 should be set aside for that specific purpose. The budget also should include funds to ensure the project activities and materials are accessible to individuals with disabilities. For example, videos could be closed captioned and translated into other languages. Written materials could be translated into different languages. Interpreters could be made available at events for those who are deaf, hard of hearing, or speak a language other than English. Next, the budget should include funds to compensate all project partners for their contribution to the project, including attendance at the Engaging Men TA events. The exception to this is if a project partner is a state, local, tribal, or territorial agency, and the activities they would be responsible for in the project are within their regular scope of work. An example of this would be a program manager at the Department of Parks and Recreation who runs an after-school program for youth. Because this is within the normal scope of work of the project manager and the Department of Parks and Recreation, this grant could not compensate them for that activity. However, you could designate grant funds to compensate them for mileage to and from the MDT meetings, travel costs associated with attending the OVW mandated technical assistance trainings, and participating in after-hour events. New to the solicitation this year are spending limits on certain activities. They are no more than 10% of the total funding may be used for media buys such as billboards, radio, TV, public service announcements, and bus subway advertisements. In some circumstances, the budget is reviewed independently of the full application. Therefore, it is important that the budget narrative be as comprehensive as possible and describe in detail each line item in the budget. A strong budget and budget narrative should provide enough information to understand the proposed project without having to refer back to the project narrative. Lastly, a friendly word of advice, and one that our peer reviewers will appreciate that you heed. Please do not use anything less than 12-point font when developing your budget. Reviewers are looking over numerous budgets, and it is very hard and frustrating to read a budget that is 10-point font or smaller. There is no page limit for the budget section, so there is no need to try to squeeze your budget onto 2 or 3 pages. In addition, the budget should be one document that is inclusive of all 3 years. Do not submit 3 one-year budgets. It is best to follow the sample budget that is accessible by clicking the link in the solicitation. It can also be found in the solicitation companion guide that is provided for applicants on the OVW website at justice.gov/OVW/resources-applicants. The last section is the Memorandum of Understanding, otherwise known as an MOU, and it is worth 20 points. Pages 13 to 14 provide detailed information on what is required to be included in the MOU. I encourage you to review this carefully when creating your MOU to ensure you are meeting all of the requirements. In the past, I've seen applications miss the cutoff score by a point because information was missing from the MOU. I'm not going to go over everything that must be included in the MOU. Instead, I am going to provide you with some examples of common mistakes and some helpful hints. Some common mistakes that result in point deductions are submitting multiple MOUs. The MOU for this program should be one document. There should not be a separate MOU for each partner. We know it is challenging to get signatures on the MOU. Therefore, you may have multiple signature pages so long as all of the names and titles of everyone signing the MOU are included on each signature page. In other words, you can create a signature page that includes all of the signature lines for each partner on the MOU. You can then make copies of this page and have each person sign their name. For example, say you have 4 project partners. The signature page would have space for all 4 signatures. However, because it's difficult to get everyone to sign one page, you would make 4 copies of this page and have each person sign one page on their designated line. You would then collect and submit the 4 signature pages, which show that all 4 partners have signed the MOU and are aware of the other partners. Another common mistake is not addressing each of the requirements in the MOU. There is no page limit for the MOU, just like the budget, so there is no excuse for not providing all of the information requested, even if it seems repetitive. Like the budget, the MOU may be reviewed separately from the full application, so it is important to include all of the requested information, even if you have addressed it elsewhere in the application. Another common mistake is missing signatures, especially the signatures of the required partners. Every person and/or organization that is listed in the MOU must sign the MOU. And last, another common mistake is submitting an outdated or irrelevant MOU. The MOU must be current and must be responsive to the solicitation requirements. In almost every circumstance, the MOU will be a new document that is drafted specifically for this proposed project. Next, I'm going to go over some tips that may improve your chances on becoming an Engaging Men grant recipient. Please note that the following list is not a guarantee that your project will be funded, but is intended to assist you with submitting a strong and responsive application. Think of your application like a blueprint. It contains all of the necessary elements that are necessary to build something, along with obtaining the required permits required to begin the project. Your application is very similar to this in that it contains all of the elements necessary to successfully receive permission, also known as funding, to begin the project, as well as the steps necessary to successfully execute and complete your project. Read the solicitation. I have not reviewed every section of the solicitation, so please read it. As I've mentioned previously, it is the applicant's responsibility to read the solicitation in its entirety. Everything that needs to be included in or with your application is mentioned in the solicitation, including supporting resources that are linked or referenced throughout the solicitation. For an application to be considered complete and move to the review process, it must include the following three components: a project narrative, a budget detail worksheet and narrative, and a memorandum of understanding. MOUs that do not contain signatures may receive point deductions or be removed from consideration. Be sure that your project strategies and activities address the areas you have identified on the summary data sheet. It is okay for projects to focus on one crime or just on men. It does not increase your chances of being awarded a grant by stating that you will address every crime if your project narrative only provides information on how you will address sexual assault. A strong application is focused on the crimes, population, and purpose area or areas that will be served. If you are submitting a continuation application, be sure be sure that your project is building upon what you have already accomplished with the last award. A continuation project should not simply be a continuation of the same activity. You must be able to demonstrate growth or expansion, or be able to articulate well the reason or reasons why you are proposing the same activities. Use the application checklist on page 27 of the solicitation. This checklist will help you ensure that all required documents are included in your application when you begin the submission process. Pages 14 to 17 of the solicitation include information on all of the additional required documents that must be submitted with your application. Should you be funded, failure to submit this additional information does cause delays in final approval of your project and your budget. Allow plenty of time to gather all of the required information. To avoid any possibility of missing the submission deadline, submit your application as far in advance of the deadline as possible. Technical issues may arise and the number of individuals seeking assistance from grants.gov increases on and near the submission date. Make the application easy to read and follow for all of the reviewers. Use the heading and subheading titles that are in the solicitation for each section. Be sure the application and responses to the program requirements and expectations are complete and clearly written. Avoid or limit the use of acronyms. Remember that the reviewers are not familiar with your community and will not be familiar with the acronyms that your organization and project partners may use. Print out the application before submitting it to ensure appropriate formatting and adherence to page limit requirements. Also, number your pages in your application. And last, if your name and contact information is listed as the POC, please monitor your inbox. There are times that the system may reject your application, and you will need to make sure you are getting those alerts. For the next couple of slides, I'm going to go over, we're going to focus on aspects of your application that relate to the documents that our financial team, the Grants Financial Management Division, GFMD, reviews if your application is recommended for funding. More specifically, I will discuss some items that GFMD has identified from prior year applications that could help with expediting their review process. So for today, I'm going to highlight certain aspects of the pre-award risk assessment and provide you with a link to a detailed webinar on how to develop the budget that will be included in your application. The first things I'll highlight are the items identified in the summary data sheet, which is completed by all applicants. Specifically, question number 4, the single audit response, and question number 8, the IRS 3-step safe harbor procedure. In question number 4 on the summary data sheet, OVW is asking that all applicants provide a statement as to whether they have expended $750,000 or more in federal funds during their last fiscal year. If you have, then you must indicate that and specify the end date of your fiscal year. However, OVW has found that applicants do not always include this information and leave out whether or not they have met the threshold, or they do not include the end date of the last fiscal year. Please ensure this question is answered in its entirety on the summary data sheet. Failure to answer this question in its entirety may result in point deductions during the peer review process. Another item I want to highlight is question number 8 on the summary data sheet, which is the IRS 3-step safe harbor procedure to determine your executive's compensation. You must provide a response to this question regardless if you use this procedure or not. If you do not, then you need to provide a statement that you do not use this procedure. If you are a nonprofit and you do use the safe harbor procedure, you must provide OVW with a disclosure letter that consists of 4 parts. The sample letter outlining all 4 parts of the disclosure can be found by clicking the additional required information link that is included in this question in the solicitation. Excuse me. Stop. Additional information related to this can be found on page 18 of the solicitation. The next item is the pre-award risk assessment. Each applicant must prepare a response to all 10 questions, and each question has multiple parts. The pre-award risk assessment questions can be found on pages 16 and 17 of the solicitation. Please be sure that you are responsive to each question. OVW has noticed from prior years that applicants do not always fully answer all parts of the questions, which in turn requires GFMD to reach out to the applicant. Some of the most common issues that we have encountered have been, for example, question number 2, where the applicant indicates that they do indeed have internal policies, but they do not provide a brief list of topics covered in the policies and procedures. Another example of incomplete responses is question number 3, where the applicant does not provide a brief summary of the organization's process for tracking expenditures, and more specifically, whether or not it tracks budgeted versus actual expenditures. So these are just a few examples, but please make sure you read each piece of each question and provide a full and comprehensive response. Should your application be funded, failure to provide all of the requested information for the pre-award risk assessment may cause delays in final approval of your project and budget. This next slide will quickly highlight some resources that are available should be used as you are creating the budget to be submitted with the application. Over the last year, GFMD has worked to develop a detailed webinar presentation on how to assist applicants in developing a budget to be submitted with their OVW application. They want to help reduce any challenges you may face with the budget and make it clear what they look for when they review your budget. This webinar provides some insight as to what OVW financial staff considers during your review. You can use the following link, justice.gov/OVW/resources-applicants. The webinar can be found under the Budget Information section on that page. Next is the Uniform Guidance to CFR Part 200, and last is the DOJ Financial Guide. The links for all of these are on the PowerPoint. You can also find them in the solicitation and also in the Solicitation Companion Guide. And if you need assistance finding these resources, please contact GFMD. If you have any questions that were not addressed during this call, please feel free to send an email to ovw.consolyouth@usdoj.gov. If you have any questions about the GFMD information discussed, you may send an email to ovw.gfmd@usdoj.gov or view the Grants Financial Management Division video on the OVW website. Thank you so much for your time today, and thank you for your interest in the Engaging Men and Boys program.